friends. My guest today is my dad. He is a hilarious dude. He cracks me up constantly. Um, and I've always appreciated his knack for having stories and telling stories. And it was cool to sit down with him and go through a bunch of this stuff. He is an awesome dad, and I love him. And his name is Chaylan Maxwell. So I don't know if I ever told you this before or not, but there was one time when I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something, and your brother Cliff came out, and it had to have been when we lived in the Dalles, and you and him and I took a trip to Pine Creek,
I remember.
and I was laying in the back seat sleeping.
I remember.
And I woke up halfway through, somewhere in this area probably, and you guys were just telling stories the whole time, basically the entire 6-hour drive, just cracking me up. And so you've always had a bunch of crazy stories and a bunch of things that have happened to you and funny situations, and that is the point of this right here, is just capturing people's stories and hearing about different people's lives. So I think it'd be cool this summer if Cliff comes out again. Maybe we could set up in the little house.
Yeah.
And then you two could do it together with me, and then you would be bouncing off each other. And because I think it's easier if you have someone else. Like when I sit down with Farger or somebody, they help me remember things that I forgot. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, and everybody has a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
on, or an opinion on how things happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be fun to have him.
Yeah, because you guys got some cool stories. So yeah, I just want to start out with basically your life growing up was probably fairly normal in that time period, but compared to now, it's like a different world. And so I just wanted you to like start off and just tell us like what you would do on a daily basis when you were a little kid. Like what'd you wake up and go do?
So we grew up in a small town, New Pine Creek, and which is on the Oregon-California border. And at the time, I remember as a kid growing up, the population sign said 460, but I'm sure it wasn't 460. I'm sure it was probably around maybe 300, if even that much. It was mostly older people, and they had nice yards, and that's where I started my first job. I was 11 and I started mowing lawns, but further back than that, as a kid growing up, mostly Tonka trucks in the backyard, and I put a million miles on my bicycles, and I had probably had 4 or 5 different bicycles, but grew up right across the street from my grandma and my granddad's house. And they passed away when I was 9, so I didn't get to spend a lot of time with them, and I didn't really get to know them. But I have a lot of memories about doing things there in their yard. And then we finally got a little house up the street from them. And just I remember we had a big creek that ran through our on the outside, I guess, of our land, the lot that we lived on. And we would go over there. I would fish all the time. It's called, of course, the Big Creek. And then on the other side of the house, there was a little creek. There were no fish that I remember in the little creek, but there was lots of trout in the Big Creek. And I'd go fishing, and we'd swim every year. We'd swim in the ice cold waters of the Big Creek.
And so you guys would just wake up in the morning and get on your bike and leave, and then just be gone for the entire day, right? Essentially.
Well, my older brother, Cliff, it was 3 years older. And so I most everything I did as a child growing up was on my own. There were very few kids my age to play with in town. And the ones that I did get to play with their parents wound up divorcing. And so I didn't get to spend a lot of time. I had one of my best friends. He would come for I think he stayed for 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks every summer. And growing up, you know, and I don't remember how old I was, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. He was there and his parents were together, but then they got divorced and he moved away. So when he would come back, I only got to see him, uh, like I say, between 2 and 4 weeks out of the year.
Mhm.
Then I had another really good best friend who lived down on the other side of town, like 8 blocks away. And I did a lot of things with him. His mom and dad, his dad was a timber faller. And of course, timber falling in that area, in the Lake County area, went to heck. Um, and so they wound up moving. But him and I we got to, I mean, we were friends and hung out together for, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
Had another best friend down the road, but uh, he was kind of in the same situation. He spent time with his dad and with his mom lived in town, but then he spent time with his dad in Lakeview, and so that kind of broke things up. So I mostly did things on my own. Spent lots of hours behind my house building roads with Tonka trucks and graders and bulldozers.
And why wasn't Cliff playing with you? He was just too much
Three,
older?
yeah, 3 years. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it was. And then my younger brother was 8 years younger than I was,
Yeah.
and so of course we hardly did anything.
Mhm. And so you had a handful of friends over the course of like 5 to 12, and you went to the school that was right down the street too, right? The school was right next to the house?
Yeah, well, up until from the first to the fourth grade, almost finishing up the fourth grade, I guess, we were in the old State Line building, which was out on the highway through US 395. And then I guess it was halfway through my fourth grade year, they had finished the new State Line school. And I remember everybody held hands and we crossed the big highway, went through the field and went into the new school. And then fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, I was there. Then my freshman year, because we lived about 1,000 yards across the California line, Oregon wouldn't take us. And so we had to go to California. So for my freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, they shipped us 50 miles one way, 100-mile round trip for 4 years.
Mhm.
So we'd catch the school bus at 6:15 in the morning, and then we'd get off the school bus at 4:50 or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's an intense ride to get to and from school.
Gave us time to sleep
Yeah.
or do our homework on the way home.
Well, until you got a car too, right? Once you got a car, you started driving?
Well, so when Cliff was a freshman, or I'm sorry, when Cliff was a senior, his senior year, I was a freshman. So I rode with him. We started football practice in the summertime, and I rode with him, and he drove a lot. And then my sophomore year, of course, I didn't have a license, but one of my good friends was a year older, so I got to ride with him a little bit, but most of it was bus riding. And then when I got my license, I drove, I don't know, I'd say once or twice, maybe a week, but it was too expensive. I mean, gas was only, I don't know, 80 or 90 cents a gallon, but that was pretty tough when you were making $2 an hour
Yeah.
wages at the gas station,
Yeah.
2 days a week.
So you're going to the school that's just right down the street, and that's when you started playing drums, right?
I started playing drums in the fourth grade. We had a teacher who was in Alturas. That's where I went, where they shipped us to high school. And Modoc Unified School District decided that they wanted to do something as far as musically, and as far as music and arts. And so they sent a music teacher down to us, and they also sent an art teacher down. The art teacher kind of fizzled out, but the music teacher his name was Mr. Buffum, and I loved him. He was an awesome teacher. And I had him in high school when I got in there as in the jazz band. But he came down, and I started playing. I mean, we all got to choose what instruments we were going to play. And my best friend at that time in school picked the drums, and I picked the tuba. And so it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's that great big massive horn that you crawl underneath and get into and wrap yourself around. And I started to play that, and in the meantime, Well, I got to go back a little bit because when I was 10, that's when I got on my girlfriend's horse that had never been ridden before, and uh, the little filly took off at a gallop across the field, and I was sliding off, and we just happened to pass a post when I slid down that far, and I hit the post with my face, knocked out 6 front teeth, busted up my face, and so I had what was called a flipper at that time. So it gave me teeth. And by the time the band, now we'll fast forward a little bit. So by the time I got ready to get into band and I thought that that's the instrument I wanted to play, my mouth, because everything was so misformed
Mhm.
from the accident, I couldn't make good contact on the big mouthpiece on the tuba. So as we're trying and I wasn't doing very well, Mr. Buffum said, "Hey," my best friend was named Sean. He said, "Hey, Sean, what, you know what? You're not picking up the drum quite."
You suck, Sean.
Yeah. And Chaylan can't play the horn because he has no mouth. So why don't you guys switch? So we said, okay. So he started playing the tuba. He didn't like it. He went to the saxophone and he became a pretty good saxophone player. Yeah. I went to the drums and started playing the drums, but the only thing we had was a marching drum, a big, deep marching drum. And we found a stand to put that on, and I used that as my snare drum. And then we had a bass drum, and I started playing the bass drum by hand, boom, chuck, boom, chuck. And then Mr. Buffum brought me in, and I wish I still had it to this day because it'd be worth money. It was a great big long bass drum pedal, but you didn't play it like this. You played it like this.
With your heel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and I can't, I want to say it was a ghost pedal, but I don't think so. I think it had a different name brand.
You like playing that better than a regular kick drum pedal?
No. But what would happen is I had to scoot the bass drum further out because he didn't want me to play it with my ankle because it was like 100-year-old pedal. So we scooted it out and I would play it like this. And so it would beat backwards, but my foot was out.
That's weird.
So then what I did is he brought me down another marching snare, and we took the snare off of it and put it on a stand up in front. So I had a snare drum, which was a marching, big, deep, and then I had a tom, and then I had a cymbal that was about an 1/8, maybe 3/16 of an inch thick. And I have no idea. It must have been a gonger or something. But when I hit it, and it just rang. And that's what I started playing. And then later on, I saved up enough money and I bought a drum set.
Yeah.
And then I was playing that.
And then so I didn't know that. You never told me that before, or I blocked it out or something. If you wouldn't have gotten your teeth knocked out, you might have never started playing drums. You might have been a tuba player.
Yeah, probably not.
And so let's go back on that one because that affected your life in every way possible, right? Your
teeth getting knocked out.
You're 10 years old, and was it you and Cliff, your brother Cliff?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't there?
No. I went down to visit, and I guess I can use their names. It doesn't matter. I went down to visit my girlfriend. Her name was Stacy. And
you're 10 years old? You went to visit your girlfriend?
Yeah. And then her younger brother was my age, Sean. I went to visit Sean, but I had a crush on Stacy. And so we were down there and we walked down to this old, we called it the haunted house. It was down their lane. We walked down there and we're throwing rocks and having a good time. And then we were walking back. And as we were walking back, we passed the corral fence, whatever, that her little filly was in. And Sean, I don't know what happened to Sean. Sean went in the house or something. And Stacy and I were out there, and I said, "Hey, boost me up," because I wanted to show off how I could ride a horse. I've never been on a horse before. The horse had never had anybody on it. And she was like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." And I said, "Oh yeah, come on." So she boosted me up on it and shot across the field and bam, smushed my mouth and stuck 3 teeth were stuck in the post.
And you had splinters in your gums too, right?
Yeah. It split my gum. My gums like this, and my teeth are here. It split my gums like this.
Oh wow!
So I had 2 gums. I had an outer gum and an inner gum.
Oh my god!
And then they had the Dr. Miles, who was an awesome dentist in Lakeview, spent I don't know how many hours trying to stitch me up and and picking the bone fragments and stuff.
Yeah, so you go flying off this horse, and I'm sure she starts freaking out. Did you black out, or like what happened to you? You were totally lucid after it happened?
Yeah, I'm sure to a certain extent I was in shock, but I can remember.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't black out. I remember holding my mouth and coming over, and there was blood all over. And I was saying, "You need go get your mom." And she was going, "Come wash your mouth out in the creek." And she could see the blood.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Go get your mom." And she said, "No, no, wash your mouth out first." And I was like, "No, go get your." Well, so
She didn't know your teeth got knocked out.
no, we didn't. We didn't know. I knew something was in. I knew I was in trouble, but I didn't
Yeah.
know how deep. So we got in the house, and her mom freaked out,
Hmm.
and we looked in the mirror, and I could see I didn't have any teeth. And then her mom got almost her mom got frantic, and I don't know how she wound up driving, but she drove us back to Pine Creek, which was 5 miles away.
And then she had to go inside and tell your mom, Dee, what happened. Yeah?
To be
She just dropped you
perfectly
off.
honest, I mean that sounds cold, and I wouldn't want to say that to harm her, but I don't remember that. I remember going in and my mom going, "Oh my God, Jaylee, oh my God," and laid me down on the couch, and then she didn't know what to do. And so I think at that point in time, she called Dr. Miles, called the dentist, and then they got me up. And then they had to take me to the hospital to do x-rays to see how much damage was done to my face. But I honestly don't remember her mom coming in and say anything. Not to say that she didn't, not to
Yeah.
say that she
You just
wasn't
don't
worried.
remember.
I just don't remember.
Yeah. So do you have, like, if you think about it right now, if you closed your eyes and thought about it, could you remember being there? Like, is that one of those memories that
Oh yeah.
is vivid in your brain?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say this, if I could change anything um, about my appearance, if I could go back, I would, because I feel like I'm a completely different person with false teeth, with a bridge.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It
So,
doesn't fit my. I mean, that's not how I looked, and I often wonder how I would look with my real teeth grown up.
well, yeah, because after that, I mean, how long did you go without teeth?
Um, I went without teeth for about I want to say 4 months, 6 months,
0 teeth on your top row.
0 teeth. Yeah. Got made fun of too. Yeah, but yeah, because I had to heal up and everything. And plus, at 10 years old, you're not done. My mouth wasn't done forming. My face wasn't done forming. So they couldn't do much about teeth until I had formed. So I want to say it was 6 months, maybe 6 months to 9 months without teeth.
That's so
And then
brutal.
I got the flipper. They made the flipper for me.
And the flipper wasn't much better, right?
No, the flipper had teeth. Yeah, the flipper had teeth.
But I mean, it would pop out on you all the time, right?
Well, no, it had little wires in the back that held in, but
Yeah.
I got to where I could pop them out, and I would pop them out at kids looking at me or something. I go pop my teeth out, and they'd always freak out, and I would do it all the time. And then mom caught me doing it, and she said, "One of these days you're going to flip those out, and they're going to break, and we're not going to buy you new ones." And I was like, "Okay." So that went on for I don't know another 6 months or whatever. And one day I was walking in the kitchen, and it popped out, chink, snapped a tooth off on the floor. But at that point in time, my mouth had grown enough that I was really actually due for a new flipper. So
Mhm.
we got a new
So you had to replace it, what, like every couple years?
one. No, I think I only had 3 new flippers.
Yeah.
Then the last flipper I had, or the second to the last flipper I had, I was in high school and I must have been a sophomore or a junior. And we were lined up in the halls, and some girls were walking by, um, female friends, and one of them had one of those icicle round, multicolored round
Lollipop?
icicles. It was about that big around, about
Okay.
that long,
Mhm.
and she was sucking on that and a popsicle. And I go, "Hey, give me a bite of that." And she leaned over and I bit into it, and my teeth snapped. And she screamed and dropped the dropped the popsicle, and my teeth went flattering across the floor. And I picked them up and took off running and ran to the office and said, "Hey, I gotta go.
I gotta go home.
I gotta go home."
Well, and then what? You had to wait for the bus?
No, because I'm pretty sure that day I drove.
Uh,
I'm pretty sure by that time I must have been a junior because I was driving. Um, I don't think I was a senior. Snap those baby right off.
yeah, that must have been awkward the next day or the next time you saw her.
I don't know if I
I-
went to school the next. Maybe I might have super glued him or something, and went to school the next day.
Yeah, that's brutal. It's one of those things that like you just I mean, anybody who has teeth takes that for granted, but if you
Yeah,
got to deal with it like that, that's crazy.
yeah. I mean, it's been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars, not only that mom and dad spent,
Uh-huh.
but your mom and I have spent.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
Hmm.
So hopefully this set will last me the rest of my life, but
Hmm.
you never know.
You never
You got to
know.
watch those popsicles.
So you're hanging out in Pine Creek, which is a town of 460 or whatever, right on the other side of the border of Oregon and California, and you got to go down the 40 miles to Alturas,
50 miles, almost
50
50.
miles to
50 miles to
Alturas.
Alturas.
God, that is so long. Um, and so what else was going on in that time period? When you were in elementary school, you're riding your bike, fishing, playing drums, and then you get to high school and you kind of doing. When did you start working? What was the first job? Was it the gas station?
The first job was when I was 11, mowing lawns. Um, and I made enough mowing lawns from age 11 to 16 to buy my first car. My first car was a Volkswagen Beetle.
How much was that?
Mm, I think it was $1,200, but I can't remember. $1,200, $1,500.
You made
$1,200.
$1,200 mowing lawns.
Mm-hmm.
How did you save that much money?
Because there wasn't anything else to spend it on. There wasn't anything else. I mean, bubble gum, penny apiece. There wasn't anything else to do.
Did you have a bank account or
Mhm.
coffee can or what?
Yep, had a bank account,
Yeah.
put money in it.
Not
So-
in Pine Creek, in Lakeview.
Bank account? Yeah, there was no bank in
Yeah.
New Pine Creek.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, what did Pine Creek have? Just the
It had, when I was growing up, it had 2 grocery stores.
Really?
It had a motel. It had a Grange Hall. It had a church, a rock shop, 2 service stations, a cafe. That was in when I was real young. And then as I got older, one of the grocery stores went out of business. One of the gas stations went out of business. The motel kind of
Yeah, who was staying at the motel?
only the
Only the finest citizens.
only the finest citizens that would pass through our territory could stay there.
Well, Dee told me that back in the day, like 1900, 1910, 1920, she said it was a red light district.
Yeah, back, I mean, long before I was born, Willow Ranch is 5 miles from New Pine Creek towards Alturas, Willow Ranch, California. And back in the 30s, I want to say the 30s, 40s, 50s, they had a mill, and Willow Ranch doesn't exist right now anymore. I mean, there's a few people that ranch down there, but the town doesn't exist anymore. But that at the time, I think my mom said that it was like a population like 2,500, 3,000. Don't quote me, but it was moving. And in Lakeview, which was 14 miles across the Oregon border, that town has always was at that time around, I want to say 3,000 to 4,000 people, and there were at one time 5 mills supporting the town of Lakeview.
Mill, you mean like a lumber mill?
Lumber mills.
Yeah.
Yep. And then slowly, one by one, they just started dropping off. The timber was getting further and further away to bring in. And then the spotted owl thing just totally flattened it.
Spotted owl, the actual animal?
Well, and I don't remember what year it was, the Congress passed the bill that spotted owl was an endangered species.
And they were native to the trees that they were chopping down.
Yeah, the dead trees.
Gotcha.
And so it was infringing in their habitat, and so the government said we're gonna shut it down, and so they pretty much did away with the most of the logging and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think at that time, I don't remember for sure, but I think at that time it had something to do with the environmentalists also, because for some reason somebody had this wild idea about clear cutting, which is absolutely insane to go in and clear cut. Um, a forest should be managed like a garden, and somewhere along the way, I don't know what the purpose was, but they had spots where they called clear cuts, and they just, I mean, you'd be driving along in the trees, and then all of a sudden, zilch, nothing, and they'd go in and they'd clear cut this area. Now, whether or not there was a purpose for it at that time, I don't know, but it made the environmentalists pretty upset, and I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't right to begin with. There was no reason that I can think of to clear cut.
Well, I think they have a law now where for every tree you chop down, you have to plant a new one, right? Isn't that something along those lines?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but the logging still hasn't opened up. The environmentalists have still fought and fought and fought over over it, and I reiterate, for a forest should be managed.
Hmm.
It it period into discussion,
Hmm.
and it can be. And instead of spending billions of dollars every year to fight forest fires, we could be raking in the revenues from managing the forest. And yeah, maybe we're going to have forest fires, but it's not going to burn up billions of dollars of timber, and we're not going to spend billions of dollars trying to fight it. Or well, yeah, we probably will spend billions of dollars fighting it, but at least we'll have generated that revenue from managing it. Um,
Well, I don't know that much about it either, but isn't it good for there to be fires occasionally because it clears the area and allows new growth?
mhm. And they do that, and I mean, they're here in Bend. They're managing the forest. They're going in and they're they've got prescribed burns, and they'll go in and they'll do a prescribed burn in so many acres, and they'll burn up all the garbage that's on the forest floor, and then yeah, and then the regrowth comes back, and yeah, that's a great way to do it. But there's no reason to let it get out of hand and burn down billions of dollars of timber
Yeah.
just for the sake of saying, hey, you know what, that's what Mother Nature does, and so
Hmm.
we're just going to do it that way.
Hmm. Uh, so at this time period, this is like, so you're born in 59. So in 69, you're 10, 74, you're 15. So in this time period in Pine Creek, were the majority of people pretty poor? I mean, it's just a tiny little community of farmers essentially, right? So most
It
people didn't have much money.
yeah, yeah, it was a poor area. Um, the cool thing about it is we didn't know we were poor.
Yeah. Yeah.
we didn't have we had a black and white television, had two channels. You had to get up and change the channel. Yep. And the main thing that I can remember as a kid growing up was seeing in the wintertime, was watching to see if there was more snow coming. Because I really did like the snow then. I don't care much for it now, but I liked it then. But the other thing was we watched oh gosh, the FBI, um, and I can't remember them all. Disney's the Wonderful World of Disney. We had these shows. Bedtime was 9 o'clock, as far as I can remember. I'm sure it was earlier than that in my younger days, but for most of the older days, up until I was, I don't know, probably a freshman or whatever, but bedtime was 9 o'clock, and so there was these. So we would eat. Usually, we had Sunday night was taco night, and then we'd sit and watch television from like 7:30 till 9, and we had to go to bed. And there was all these shows on Sunday night that I can't remember right now, but every once in a while when I hear the music or I see one come on, it's just a deja
It
vu.
takes you right
It
back to
takes
it.
me right back
Yeah.
to when we were getting ready for
Hmm.
bed,
Hmm.
and yeah, the thing that I'll back up that I left out about my getting my teeth knocked out and how my mom reacted was when I was a year and a half old. My older brother, we were at my grandma's house, and my older brother, Cliff, I. That was back in the day when we had outhouses, um, and uh, we were just starting to get indoor plumbing then, and they delivered milk in in the glass bottles,
Uh-huh.
and I had evidently picked one up and was walking with it. And Cliff decided that I shouldn't be. And so was trying to chase me down with it. I took off running and I fell, and it broke. And a big chunk came up and hit me across the nose and down into my eye. And it was bleeding really bad, and I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't crying or anything. And so they threw me in the car and took me up rushed me to the doctor up in Lakeview because they thought maybe I had damaged my eye because it was such a bad cut and it went so far and so deep. And mom said that every time she put the rag on me to stop the bleeding and the blood and the cold compress, I would start screaming. And then
Mhm.
she'd take it off and I'd bleed, but I wouldn't cry. I'd be fine.
So you think she was trying to say that you had whatever that condition is where you don't feel pain or something?
Yeah. Something like that.
It's pretty crazy how many times you got hurt
Well, and
in your
then
life.
when I was 5 or 6, the story that I tell, the story that I remember was that I found a pocket knife, an old rusty pocket knife behind the sink when we were moving the sink out from the little house. She seems to remember it differently. So, but anyway, needless to say, I wound up with a pocket knife, and we had an old barn out behind the house, out behind the garage. And back in the day, they used baling twine to bale hays, and it was like this, the old twine.
Mhm. Super
And
thick.
so you'd cut it, and then you'd cut the two, and then you'd wrap them around this big post that came up, and then you'd feed the cattle. And so there was all these big rounds of this wrapped twine. And Cliff and I were out there one day, and he had a knife, and his was much sharper, I'm sure, and less rusty. And he said, "Hey, let's see who can cut through these strands of." And so we were whittling on him, and we were pulling, and he cut through first and came back and just nicked his ear. And I was pulling, and I came back, and I ran the knife blade up my nose. And luckily, it was only like a 3-inch, 2.5-inch blade,
Yeah.
3-inch blade. So, but it went pretty far up. Could have hit me in the eye, or could have stuck me in between my teeth or something.
When you still
Because
had
those
them.
were when I still had my real teeth. Yeah, and so they had to rush me to the doctor then. And
Jesus.
same thing. They kept trying to get the bleeding stopped, and I was crying. And then when they just leave me alone and let me bleed, then I was just fine. I was okay. And they couldn't do anything because it was way up inside my sinuses
Uh-huh.
in my sinus cavity or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they just taken gauze and just stuffed gauze, packed it full of gauze. And so I had to run around like that for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then pulled the stuffing out, and it was like 3 foot of gauze. And
Yeah.
so that's why when I got my teeth knocked out, that was like the third.
She wasn't even phased. She's like, oh,
No.
here we go again.
He's trouble.
Well, she used to tell me the story too, and it must have been Cliff because so Grandma D was 15, right? When she had Cliff?
Yes,
So
15 and a half.
15 and a half. And so she was 18 when she had you? Something like that?
Right, or something like that.
So she was super young. And she told me the story, and maybe you can pick up where I leave off about at that point in time. So this would have been 58, 76, 55, somewhere in there. She was driving in the pickup truck, and I believe Duke was driving, and she was holding, I imagine, baby Cliff.
Yeah,
And they swerved or something.
that was before me.
And he flew out the window, right?
Yeah.
Because there were no seat belts, there were no car seats,
No.
nothing. And the window was open. They swerved, and he went flying out.
I don't know if they rolled the truck. I don't believe the story is he just flew out the window. I think the story is that they rolled the truck. My dad, Duke, swerved, and I don't know if they were swerving a deer or swerving traffic or whatever, but I think the truck rolled and Cliff flew out and landed like 20 feet away in a barbed wire fence or something. Never got hurt.
He's like a 5-month-old baby.
Yeah,
he flew out the window.
He's the golden child.
Oh, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
she told me that one time, and I was like, what?
Yeah, the only time I remember him getting hurt is I was probably 7 and he was probably 10. And that's when Dad worked at the meat packing place, A&B meat packing. Well, or actually it was Bonds first. And they would they would kill the animal, and then they would skin it. And then the hide that came off, they would, of course, save it, and they would throw it down this chute, and it would fall down. And then there was down below in the below the deck that you could get a tractor into underneath it. there was, oh gosh, tons of rock salt, and then you would take the hide and you would stretch it out, lay it out all dicky and icky, and you would throw the rock salt on it and cover it with rock salt, and then that was to cure it. And I don't know what they did about the flies or anything, that kind of stuff. Maybe the salt cured it so fast. I don't know about that, but I remember going up one day and he was um, we were doing the hides, and dad had got on the tractor, and we were like, hey, can we ride in the bucket? And he was like, no, you don't need to ride in the bucket. And we're like, oh, come on, please listen. And he was like, oh, okay, get in the bucket. So we got in the bucket, and the bucket, of course, he tilted down. We crawled up in it. Well, we sat like this. Cliff had his arm up on the edge of the bucket, and dad tilted the bucket back. Well, when he tilted the bucket back, the arms that come down that hold the bucket came up, and one of the bars came down, and Cliff got his forearm pinched between the bucket and the bar, and just smush, gone. It was probably about the size of a nickel, between a nickel and a quarter. It was just perfectly round, and it was just gone.
Yeah.
And he jerked his arm, and so there's just this hole, and it's one of those that doesn't bleed. It's deep enough that it's to the meat.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bleed. It's fatty, tissuey or whatever. And I went, oh no, Dad, wait. And Cliff grabbed me and said, shut up. Don't say anything. And I was like, you're bleeding. What are we gonna do? Your arm. And he was like, shut up. We're gonna get he didn't want to get Dad in trouble for letting us ride in the bucket. And he didn't want to get us in trouble for, begging to ride in the bucket. And damn it, I told you shouldn't ride in the bucket. And so Cliff didn't say anything. That's the only time that I remember him getting.
He's still got a scar for that, doesn't he?
Well, what happened is he went into the Peace Corps after he graduated. He went into the Peace Corps, and well, I guess it was after he got out after he graduated college. He went into Peace Corps, and I don't know if he got injured again or what on that same arm, but he cauterized it. Took a butter knife. There was some sort of thing that they were doing as survivalists or something in the Peace Corps. I don't know. You'd have to hear that story from him.
We'll have to get that from him.
He had a knife and cauterized it, and so it's a pretty big scar now.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, so that, I mean, for whatever reason, that was just kind of the story of your life, right? Every situation.
Every so often, I had to get hurt just to get attention.
Yeah, the other one was so you started working after you were mowing the lawns. You made the $1,250 to buy the Volkswagen. Soon after that, you started working at the gas station.
I started working at the gas station. Cliff was already working at the gas station, and so I would ride up with him.
And this is in Lakeview, right?
This is in Lakeview. I would ride up with him and work with him every once in a while. But then once I got my license, then I was driving up and I was working at Cal's Exxon in Lakeview. And that's where, and then I started earning some big time money there.
What was minimum wage then? Do you remember?
I don't remember what minimum wage was, but I think he was paying me to start out with $1.75 an hour.
So you worked there for about 3 years. And in that time period, you must have had a bunch of different people that, I mean, the people that work at gas stations are like high school kids or older people who couldn't find a different job.
High school kids.
High school kids
High
only?
school kids.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And so what was the story about your friend in the glass?
Oh, so the owner, Cal Newman, his son, Steve, worked there too. And Steve was a year older than I was. And it used to be busy enough that two people, in fact, when Cliff was working, it was busy enough that they sometimes had 3, maybe sometimes 4 guys working. Excuse me, because they did lube, oil, and filters. And they did, when they did a lube, oil, and filter, they cleaned the car out and everything. So actually at one time, I think he employed 4 people. 4 people worked at a time. And then slowly but surely things kind of dropped off a little bit. And then pretty soon it was just 2 people working. And then finally it became 1 person could work. Sometimes you got super busy.
1 person at a time for an 8-hour shift?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so there was, so Steve and I had contests. I mean, it was kind of a competitive thing to see how many gallons of gas you pumped in a day. And when on the cash register, there was letters of who rang the charges up. So if you rang up a sale, Cal, the owner, could look at it and say, oh, that was whose sale and what. And in case there was any discrepancies or problems or anything, they could find out who it was. So my letter was C. Steve's letter was X. So I'm working one Sunday and I'm on a record pace. I'm cooking along and I've got a tape a mile long of all C's and I want to keep it that way. And lo and behold, Steve shows up to get a quart of oil or something. And he comes in to ring it up. And I don't want an X on my ticker tape of C's. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'll get it. He was like, no, I'll ring it up. And I go, no, I'll ring it up. So we got in not just an argument, not mean or anything like that, just a competitive argument. I wasn't going to let him put an X on my C's. And I was like, no, you're not going to screw up my tape. I'm going to do it. And so we got in a push and match. And he was a little guy, but he was a good wrestler. He was a really, really good wrestler. And I kind of shoved him a little bit out of the way and got in. And the windows, there was windows on the two corners, mm-hmm. and big, thick plate glass windows. And they were probably 3 feet by 6 feet, maybe. They were huge. And the only thing in between them was just steel. So then he pushes me back and there's the office chairs right there and we're pretty close to the glass. So I take one more try at him and I get a hold of him. I get him in a bear hug and I move him and I kind of sling him towards the pop machine. And as he kind of loses his balance, I start over. Well, as I get over there, he shoves me and I lose my balance and I land in the chair and then I fall backwards and I go through the glass and it breaks, of course, and I fall backwards. Uh-huh. And he's like, oh my God. And he grabs me. And as he grabs me, shards are coming down. And a couple of them hit me in the face. And then one great big one came down, but he got me out of the way fast enough. Uh-huh. And this big thing, otherwise it would have been a guillotine. It would have sliced me in half. So he gets me out and he's like, oh my God. And so my face is bleeding. And I said, I think something's wrong with my back. And he lifts my shirt up and I got a chunk, about between 3 and 4 inches and about an inch and a half wide. Uh-huh. That's gone. And so we're looking all over, and it's one of those like cliffs. It's into the fatty stuff. It's deep, and so it's not bleeding. And he's looking at it. He's going, "Oh my God, we got to do something." And I'm going. He goes, "Well, there's got to be a piece of meat here somewhere because you're missing a big chunk of meat." So anyway, they get me to the hospital, and there's the little town of Lakeview. There's no doctor on call.
Yeah, and there's
no doctor there. No, it's during the day. It was like on a Sunday, I think. There's no doctor there, so they got to call Dr. Strebe in. So that takes a half an hour for Strebe to get there. So I'm laying on the table, and by this time it's starting to hurt. And I'm like, you guys got something for the pain here because this is kind of hurting me pretty bad. And they're like, well, no, we can't give you anything till the doctor gets here. And so I'm laying there for like 15, 20 minutes. Well, pretty soon it dawns on me that something is leaking. And I look down off the table and I'm got a pretty good pool of blood now. It's finally starting to bleed. Mm-hmm. And then that of course starts playing with my head, I'm going to lay here and bleed to death. And I'm like, hey, I got a lot of pain. I'm losing a lot of blood here. And they're like, the doctor will be here pretty soon. Just hang on. You're not going to bleed to death. And
this is in the waiting room?
No, they got me on a table. Okay. They got me on a table and I'm just laying there bleeding. So then finally Strebe gets there and he looks at it and he goes, okay, where's the chunk that came out? And by that time, Steve, I think as the story goes, I'm not positive, but as the story goes, I think Steve went back because he had to work. He had to take my shift and put X's on it on my ticker tape. Damn him. Yeah. So he went back to work and then I don't know if he called or what, but he said, there's no meat here. There's no chunk of hide. So he had to stitch up this gap. And to this day, if you take and run your finger along my back by that scar, I can feel it here. And if you keep moving, then I can feel it here.
It just picks up where it left off.
Because
they just stretch the skin?
They just stretched it over. Huh.
So what did Cal say when
he was not very happy? Oh, he was very, very unhappy. Well, first off, he had to go through the trouble of boarding it up for a couple of nights. And then the chunk of glass was probably back in those days was probably a couple $100. Uh-huh. and then I'm sure he had workman's comp on me or something, because I don't remember paying for anything. But yeah, Steve got in a lot of trouble for it, and it's like, oh, it's okay, I'm alive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We had a lot of fun.
This was in high school then.
Yeah, I was a senior.
Yeah. And so then you finish up school, and when did you start playing drums in the band? Was that
Well,
directly after?
so back up. I bought the drum set in the 5th or 6th grade, and I'm storing it at the State Line School. I've got it in the office, and everybody's okayed with it. Well, during the summer, uh, for I don't know how many years, I contracted and got the job of mowing the school lawn. It was huge, and I had a ride mower, and I think at that time I was getting $1.50 an hour or something like that. So I was making some pretty lucrative
Big
big bucks right then. So when I was done, at any time I wanted to, I had a key to the school, and so at any time, day or night, I could go in and play the drums. And I would go up on the weekends. Well, during the summer, I'd go and play anytime I wanted and have a good time. So one day, I'm going up to play the drums, and I go walking, and I unlock the door of the first front door to go in. I unlock it, big door, and there's the little side windows that are full of steel mesh, and I'm unlock that, and then alongside of it is the bigger window, and I unlock the door, and I walk in, and I open up the office door right to the right. I unlock it because it was always kept locked. I opened it up, walked in, and back in the day, we used to get if you took your report card home and you had it signed and you brought it back the very next day because they needed it back, you got a piece of candy or a piece of gum. If you didn't bring it back that day, you were in trouble, and you darn well better get it back in the next few days, but you didn't get a piece of candy or a piece of bubble gum. And that was kept in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. And I walked in and I thought, oh, you know what? I did bring my report card back, last year. I think I'll just help myself to a piece of bubble gum. And so I open up the drawer and I get out a piece of gum and I close the drawer, and then my brain clicks in and I'm like, I'm standing in glass. And I look down and the window shattered. And then I stepped back and the window was shattered from the front door. I'd walked through the glass, and I guess the piece of bubble gum was on my mind. And I looked over and my drum set's gone. And I'm like, oh man. So I run home. We call the police. They get down there. Big, huge. They come to find out whoever had broken in went on a rampage, just tore things up, sprayed the fire extinguishers all over the place, tore the hell out of the everything, cut the walls up and stuff. Did a huge bunch of damage to the school. But they took my drum set. The community felt so bad for me because I'd spent my money, and the drum set was the drum set I paid for myself, and it was like $850 for a 5-piece drum set and the cymbals and everything. The community got together and felt so bad that they decided to give me a Pancake Feed, and they took donations. And this, I want to say Clem Mulkey, I don't know. Anyway, she's a super nice lady. She's the one that put it on. They put it on to her house, and they collected $700, almost $800. And so they gave it to me, and I had saved up a little bit more money because by this time the drum set's more. So I spent about $1,000 and got another drum set exactly like the last one. It was red metal flake pearl, 5-piece. I bought that brand new, put the cymbals with it and everything, got it all set it up in the school, started playing again. And about 8 months, 9 months, a year, I don't remember. Lo and behold, down in Willow Ranch, 5 miles away. And I don't know if I should use their name. I guess I shouldn't.
Yeah, you don't have to.
2 brothers on a stealing rampage. They had a pile of stuff. They
stole it and they never sold it?
No, they took and peeled all of the red metal flake off of all the drums. Of course, the snare was just chrome. they peeled all of the metal, all of the metallic red metal flake off, and it was just wood.
Because somebody could have recognized it. It was
Yes.
that rare.
Yeah. And then there was 3 cymbals. I had my hi-hat, my 2 hi-hats, and then I had 2 other cymbals. And so they notified me and said, "Hey, we think we found your stuff, along with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of other stuff."
Mhm.
And they said, "Can you come down? And is there any way that you think that you could recognize it?" And I said, "Absolutely." They said, "Well, how do you think you have to tell us how you think you could recognize it?" And I said, "Okay, I can do that." So when we get down there, they open it up, and here's this. And I look at it and I go, I have no idea that my drum set was red metal flake, and
Mhm.
it's a pearl. But I said, I can tell you this: I recognize the drum beat where the drum was hitting on the front and the marks and stuff. I recognize that. And then I had a 16-inch crash Zildjian cymbal, and I had a big old gnarly scratch in it from something. I said, I can guarantee you that's mine. They said, "Okay, do you think that you can testify in court to this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, if I have to." And they said, "Yeah, you might have to." So trial shit comes. They call me to the deal, and I'm just a young kid.
You had to testify against the 2 guys that stole it?
The 2 brothers, and they were sitting there. So I'm up in the box looking at them.
And they're like,
yeah, yeah. They're like, "Dude, you're gonna," no, they were just sitting there looking at me. And I said, "Yeah, I can." And they said, "Well, can you tell us how you know this is your set?" And so I pointed out all the things. And finally the judge was like, "Yeah, you know what? He's done. It's
yeah.
boom, boom." So they got me off the stand, and I was terrified. And then everything got all done, and they said, "Okay, your drum set is." They said that, it's your drum set. You can pick it up. What's left of it. And the boys wanted me to tell you they're very sorry that they stole your drum set. They thought it was a school.
From a 10-year-old kid.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they said that no one else claimed anything. There was more drums and more cymbals. And they said that if you want all the rest of that stuff along with yours. So I had this massive drum set. Then I had another 5-piece at home. And so what I did was I took and painted the drums. I painted them black, and then I took and sanded them so the black was just in the veins of the maple. And then I varnished it. And then I put those 2 pieces together, those 2 sets together. I made a 10-piece set. And then I had like 3 other drums and like 4 other cymbals. And so I had this massive, and that's where I learned to play double bass.
Yeah.
And so I'd set that up, I had it all set up in the garage, and I'd go out, I'd play for 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day.
And Dee was fine with that?
Yeah, she never did complain. I had the 5-piece set up in our little bitty, you've seen the little bitty room that we had at the house.
See, I always thought you played it at the school. I didn't realize you played it at the house.
No, I had it at the house. I had a 5-piece drum set up in the corner over there, and it was tight, but you'd have to walk around it. I'm sure Cliff enjoyed it. But then I had to put it out in the garage. And then when I had both those sets plus the extra drums and cymbals, then I set them up, and across down. Okay, so if you go down the street and then you go to Highway 395, like you're going to come to Lakeview, then as you're sitting there and you can go right to Lakeview, right across the street was Kay's Texaco.
Mhm.
That's where we caught the bus to go to high school. They would sit, and that's 5 blocks from our house. They would sit there and drink their iced tea in the evening and listen to me play. And they would just sit out there and listen to me. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was a good drum set after I got all that stuff together.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like you said about getting my teeth knocked out and I became a drummer. Getting my drum set stolen turned out to be something good for me because I
Yeah.
learned to play double bass, double
Uh-huh.
sets, and so I can kind of basically ambidextrous
Uh-huh.
on with both of them.
And so you got pretty good then after that, like during high school years?
No, because I played in the jazz band, and then what you were referring to a little bit ago is I sold all that stuff, and then I lived in Lakeview, and I was working one day part time at this little gas station right across from Cal's, and I knew this guy that was in a band, and he came in one day and he said, "Hey, somebody told me you play the drums," and I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, we have a band and our drummer is sick or something happened to him, and we want to know if you can play. And I said, well, I don't have a drum set right now. And they said, okay, well, that's kind of a problem. And I said, well, let me see.
That's kind of a problem.
Let me see what, because I guess they were on the outs with the drummer. I don't know. Anyway, the option wasn't there to play his set.
To use his, yeah.
So at that point in time, I jumped in the car and I drove to Klamath Falls and bought an 8-piece set.
That day, you're like, I'm in a band now. I'm going to.
Yeah, because I wanted a drum set anyway.
Yeah.
And so I bought this 8-piece drum set, brought it back, and showed up. I said, so when's the practice? And they said, you got drums? And I said, yeah. And so I showed up, and I at that time I was working a lot of odd jobs, and I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was living pretty inexpensively. And so I managed to save quite a bit of money at that time. And so I started playing. We played that weekend. Then I played the next weekend with them, and we were making $50 a night. I was getting paid $50 a night to play, but I was only 18 and a half, 19.
Uh-huh.
So, and we were playing in the bars.
And what were you guys playing? Covers?
We were rocking. No, yeah, just the 80s stuff. And something will pop in my head in a minute, but Knights in White Satin, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we played rock and roll, but we played, and we didn't. I told them, hey, I'm not doing country, and we called it
doing any Freebird, man.
We called it country and western back then. Now they just call it country. But I said, hey, I don't care much for country and western, that boom chuck stuff.
It was probably huge in Lakeview in the early 80s.
Yeah, and I said no, but there was enough stuff. Cheap Trick had some things like that. We played we played Nick. I sang Nick Gilder, Hot Child in the City. So I was doing some singing too.
While you were playing drums?
Yeah. And if I would have just had a good voice, it would have worked out perfect. But I sucked. But what would happen is at break time, because I was underage, I had to leave. Legally, I could be in as an employee.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stay in there. I could come in when the set started. I would have to leave. So I would go out and sit on the curb. And the other boys, they'd be in there.
They'd be there
drinking it up, or out smoking pot out back or whatever. And I'm sitting out on the curb, and people come out, hey, man, dude, I like your drumming and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, cool. So that lasted for a couple of weekends. And then I thought the gig was done. And the lead singer came over and said, hey, you interested in doing this? And I said, yeah, but what about so-and-so? And they said, nah, we booted him. I go, oh, that's great. And they said, yeah, we like you better and you play better. And I was like, okay. And so we started playing at that time, and I kept having to leave. And we played, I don't know, 2 or 3 different bars. And then because I said I was making decent money and I was saving money, we had crap I wanted to do more things. I mean, I had this vision.
Ambition.
I had a vision. I had ambition. And so I went to about 5 months later, I went back to Klamath Falls, and I bought this PV PA system.
Yeah? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were this high and this wide and about that thick. It was huge. Mm-hmm. It was massive. And I mean, it would blast. And then I bought, I remember this day, Shure, SHURE, SM57s.
Yeah, those are still very common.
Yep. So I had those, and I had the stand, so I had mine set up with boom, and the guys were just like, "Oh wow, this is so cool, dude!" And so we played. Well, then it was kind of starting to wear on me a little bit that nobody else had any ambition. Mm-hmm. The lead singer, bless his heart, he'd show up, just after changing the oil in his truck. He'd have a white T-shirt with holes in it and 90 weight oil, or 1040 oil on it.
Yeah.
And he'd come in smoking a cigarette, and he'd stand up there, damn, and he'd tune his guitar for 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then we'd play for a little while, and then we'd take a break for 20, and then we'd come back, and then he'd tune his guitar again for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so finally one day we had a meeting, we'd practiced, and we sat down, and I said, hey guys, I don't know about you guys, but I said, I don't want to play in a bar. And I mean, we could do dances, we could do stuff like that. We could get better and we could, I mean, I wasn't talking about, going to the Palladian downtown Los Angeles,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I was talking about doing dances and stuff like that. And I said, I'm actually looking at and at that time it's still called it, but it's old school. Octoplus, the Ludwig Octoplus, double sets. You know what I'm talking about?
That's the name of the entire set, like a
Yeah.
5-piece.
No.
It's 8.
No, it's double bass. It's actually 2 sets. It's got 2 bass drums. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 toms, and then you could add more to it. And I had added 2 more, and I showed them. I said, "This is what I want to do," and they're looking at it and they're going, we can't even fit the PA system and the drum set you have on the stage." And I said, I know, that's the point. I don't want to play on these little bitty dinky stages in the bars anymore. And the drunk guys come over, "Hey, can you guys play Leonard Skinner?" And they're throwing up all over the place and banging into the microphones and stuff. And I was like, I want to do something. They were like, "Well, this is kind of where we're at right now." And so I think we played, I don't know, I probably played another 4 or 5 months. And then I said, "Hey guys, I don't want to do this anymore. The smoke was killing me, and it was just a big drinking fest and a drug fest for those guys, and nobody wanted to." I'll tell you something that's embarrassing, but I'll tell you because I can't leave it out of the story. I bought I guess for lack of better terms, an Elvis Presley jumpsuit.
It sounds pretty awesome.
It was orange, and I had this orange multicolored shirt that I wore, and I showed up in this jumpsuit, and I don't know if I got a picture of it, but if you saw it, you'd crap.
And then were they just like, "What?"
Yeah, everybody was just like, "Dude, what are you doing? You're on the Johnny Carson show?" And like I said, the lead singer would show up, and he had just changed oil in his truck. He just literally got off the asphalt out from underneath his truck, jumped in, grabbed his guitar, jumped in the truck, and drove down.
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, man, you guys are killing me." And so I don't know. I guess I was.
It had to end. Do you remember what you guys called yourselves? What the band name was? No. Did it change, or was it always the same thing?
It was always the same thing.
Yeah.
Our bass player, he wasn't very good. Him and the lead guitarist, lead singer, they were the two that put the band together. And then we found, and then the bass player, he wasn't into doing anything but drugs and alcohol, and he wasn't interested in getting better or playing better. I mean, when you're playing a song and something gets screwed up in it, then the next time you guys get ready to practice, you should be going over that song and going, "Okay, what happened? Somebody missed the count there." He was like, "Oh, well, it's no big deal. We'll miss it again next time." It didn't matter to him. So we canned him, and that broke his heart. He's like, it's like what you see on, the rock star, or what
With
the
Mark
movie?
Wahlberg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they throw him out of the band and he freaks out.
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, this guy was kicking stuff around, and you guys are going to be sorry. This band's going to go under. You guys you won't make it without me." And he was doing the same thing that Mark Wahlberg was doing.
Yeah.
We're like, "Yeah. Well,
Okay.
We're sorry. You know what? We're probably not going to make it, but we're going to try without you." And we did better after that. And actually, the next guy we picked up played the bass and he played keyboards.
Nice.
Yeah, and he was really, really talented. And he kind of had the same idea that I did. And then, like I said, it just kind of fizzled out. And we had nobody. I couldn't sing, for God's sakes.
Well, it must have been insanely hard to find talented people in that small of a town.
Oh yeah, but we could have. I mean, at that time, like most bands, if we just would have went out and looked to find somebody who could sing, it would have been fantastic. Yeah. And we could have done things. There is I don't think you're aware of this. There is a band that came out of Lakeview.
Really?
Yeah, and they were awesome. I remember them as a kid. Their name was Brew, and I'll give a shout out to Cleve Brock.
BREW?
BREW, Brew. Their the vehicle that they had all their equipment and everything was a hearse. And you know where Alger's Theater is?
The only theater in Lakeview?
The only theater in Lakeview. Okay, right across the street from that.
And Dairy Queen.
No.
Or Burger Queen.
Okay, just go across the street, right across the street from the Algiers. Algiers is here, and then Dairy Queen is there, just straight across. And I can't remember what the building's called. The Memorial something or something like that. Anyway, the doors opened up and you went down into the kind of the basement area. That's where they played. And I remember going to a couple of dances there. Brew, B-R-E-W. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, dude, they were awesome. And
so you would go see them and be like, this is where it's at.
Oh man, they were like rock stars.
Was their drummer good? You could have nudged him
honestly,
out.
I don't remember that drummer, but I just remember them. It was kind of weird looking back at it because I remember them being really popular. And I don't know, they didn't go on to do anything major, but they did stay friends and they did stay together. But yeah, it was a big deal. Brew. Yeah, you'll have to look it up when we get off.
Yeah, well, that's funny.
Cleve Brock.
So then after that, you're kind of like, this isn't happening. I gotta figure something out. And so then you started getting serious about. You did carpentry for a while.
Did carpentry for a while, but I'll back up for just a second and tell you that Cleve Brock of Brew had a younger sister named Carol. They lived up 3 or 4 houses up the street from my aunt and uncle, Bart and Donna. And when we were kids, we'd come up and visit Bart and Donna, and Mom and Dad would go to Safeway and do the shopping and whatever they needed. We always came up on Saturdays to do that. So one Saturday, I must have been about 5, 6, 7. Tina, my cousin, was Carol's best friend. And they happened to be up there, and we went to their house for some reason. Their mom and dad were gone. And we had toast in the toaster, and we were getting ready to eat, and it popped, but the toast didn't come up. And so we pushed it back down again, and I put a knife in it to get it out.
How'd that work out?
Blew the fuse box, knocked the knife out of my hand. And then the electricity, that just reminded me of another story of me. Cliff and I had walkie-talkies, and they were the great big huge style, and I must have been 5, 6. Cliff was 8 or 9, and we'd go, Roger, over. Do you read me? Yep, Roger, kind of like you and your brother. Roger, out. But they were big. I mean, nice walkie-talkies. And Cliff had headed out over in the field, and I was in the house, and I was like, Roger, can you hear me? Cliff, can you hear me? Over. I was like, he's too far. And I just happened to look up for some reason and noticed that the light socket above in the little house in the hallway, it didn't have a light bulb in it. And I thought if I could just get a little more power to my walkie-talkie, I could reach Cliff in the field.
Yeah.
And I put my antenna up in that thing, and my walkie-talkie disintegrated in my hand. It just exploded, and didn't hurt me, but Mom and Dad were pretty mad. But anyway, okay, so go ahead. That was just another story.
Yeah.
I messed up a lot of stuff.
What'd you do this time? No, what I was going to say is that I think that's a common thread in people in like their late teens or early 20s. They go for something, and if it doesn't quite work out, or they can't get people around them to like put in the same effort, then they're like, hey, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And so, I mean, that was right around the time where you started working at Schwab's, right?
Well, so when I was working at Cal's, when I got done with Cal's, I was 18, and there was some building going on, and I had a good friend said, hey, you ought to build with us. And I said, well, I'm looking for a job. And a guy named Archie Osborne, the most wonderful boss in the whole world. It taught me so much about being a boss, and not a boss, but a human being, a managing human being. He hired me, and his son worked for him, and his name was Archie B. So it was Archie C and Archie B. And so I started working with him. And Archie B, his boy, he kind of had a problem with me to begin with, because they hired me for the sole purpose of running a jackhammer. And we would go down early in the morning at like 6:30, and we would pick up from the cement place. We'd pick up this old piece of junk tractor that had a compressor that we were using for a compressor. and I would drive it all the way from out of town into town, freezing ass cold. I'd be all bundled up, and the tractor, after you get to going a ways, it would just start vibrating, and violently. And so I'd have to stop, pull over the side of the road and stop, and then I could pull back out and get it going again. And I had to do, I don't know how many stops to get there. So we get to the job site, we go inside, and they've got this all mapped out on the floor. So I start jackhammering the concrete so we can run pipes and stuff through it. That's what they basically hired me for. In the meantime, there was a door at the end of the hallway that the handle was messed up on. And every time I'd go out it was screwing up. And so I could see that it looked like it was the screw was out or in or something. And I remember looking around, and I couldn't find a screwdriver, but I found Archie B's chisel and his nice razor sharp chisel. And I remember trying to move to tighten the screw or something like that. And it snapped a big chunk of his razor sharp chisel. He was so mad. But I started with them. And then I will say this, while I was working with them, I'd been there about a year, and we were building a house, and we had it framed, and the roof was on, and they were just, we had some of the windows were on order and showed up, but I don't think we had any of the windows in. And we had the sheathing on the outside, the plywood and everything up. And the lumber truck showed up, great big semi, flatbed showed up, and it was wintertime, and so there was like a inch and a half of snow out, and they pulled in, and they had a massive load of sheetrock for us, and we were getting ready to rock the place, and it was lunchtime, and so Archie says, "Hey, let's take a break." And so the two guys that came out with the lumber truck, they all came in. We all knew each other, and we sat around and ate lunch. And when we were done with lunch, we were getting ready to go, and Archie B, the boss, says, "Hey, you can drive that truck." And I was like, "Of course I can. I've got a CD." CD. No, I didn't have CDL. I go, "Yeah." So I get in it and I start backing up. Well, and it was kind of up to the house. And there was a great big, it was at the corner. And on one side was the huge sliding glass doors. And then the other side was a huge picture window. And that's where we were going to come through with the sheetrock. So I'm backing up. And as I'm coming in, there's a dip, and then it comes back up. And I'm spinning in the snow. It's slick. And they're like, "No," so I come back and I take another run at it. Well, on the third run, they're like, "Come on, come on, come on." And I get a good run at it. And as I come up, I didn't get on the brakes quick enough. And I put the back of that truck about 1.5 feet into the corner of that house. Wiped out. I mean,
oh my God.
Wiped out the 2x4s and all that stuff. And all the everything,
all the framing. Yeah.
All the framing. Just smushed it 1.5 feet in, and Archie's there, and they're all waving me back, and he goes, "That's far enough." And I got out, and I looked at how much. I mean, we had to tear the corner of it out. Yeah. All the studs were snapped, broken. You couldn't just push it back and try to put a screw in it or a nail. And I was pretty young, and I'd only been working there a short time, and I just assumed that I was fired for being so stupid.
Yeah.
And so I walked in, and everybody was around scratching their head. "God dang, man, no, Jesus, what are we going to do?" And they're all trying to figure out how many 2x4s are going to have to come out and what we're going to have to do. And we might have to jack the corner of the house up, because I did so much damage. So I went in the other room and started packing up my tools, and I had my pouch, my tool pouch, and I started packing up my stuff. And Archie comes in, and he says, what are you doing?" And I said, I'm packing my stuff up. And he goes, "Well, what the hell for?" And I said, "Well," I go, "I'm fired, aren't I?" And he goes, "Hell no, you're not fired. We need help fixing the corner of the goddamn house."
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not fired. And he goes, "No, you're not fired. People make mistakes. Let's go." And that was a pivotal moment in my life that changed my attitude towards people in business. And I think that is what helped me. If I was successful at all in with Les Schwab, that moment right then was why I had any success at all in Les Schwab.
Because you could forgive.
It's just people make mistakes, and most people would have just, I would have got out of the truck and they would have said, "Get your crap and get your butt out of here before I put my foot in, and he wasn't. He was hunting me down, find out why I wasn't in helping him. And he was like, hell no, you're not fired. So yeah, that was an unbelievable moment in my life. And I think that helped me. I know that helped me later on in life. But anyway, back to the story. So I worked with them, but as I was working with them, I was doing other stuff. And at that time I thought, hey, this is 1980-ish. I thought, you know what? I need to get a state contractor license. That'd be cool if I had a state contractor license. And back then it took money to get your license and your bonding, your surety bond. And I mean, that was it. You just kind of put in for it and they give it to you.
Yeah.
You didn't have to take a test or anything like that. Now they've got this massive test you have to take, and it's very difficult. I had to do a lot of studying to get it, but I got it again a couple of years ago. But at that time it was nothing. So I got I got licensed and bonded, and I got my state contractor's license. So I was working with them, and then I decided they were running out of stuff for me to do. And so I got with a friend of mine, or actually a couple friends of mine. And the friend of mine, his father had a partner, and they went in together on this subdivision in Lakeview. And we had, I believe it was 42 or 44, 45 houses to build in this subdivision. And they got the bid, they got the contract. They came in, they did all the infrastructure, put the roads in, these gorgeous, beautiful curbs, the little sloped curves that, I mean, nowhere in Lakeview had these curbs. They had this, they had the pavers come in, they ran all the water lines and everything, all the infrastructure done. And we started building, and we built 4 houses, and then the bottom fell out of it. So, and then, I mean, the bottom was falling out of Lakeview, most everything. The town was starting to dry up, and things just had gone to heck.
Was that across the whole country, or was it just in Lakeview? Because there was a recession in 82-ish, right? Wasn't there?
I don't know if it was across the country. I was too young and naive and selfish, not knowing things going on around me. I was just into my own little world. Yeah, and so I decided that I better find some other stuff. So I got a job working out at a sawmill in Silver Lake, which Silver Lake's 95 miles from from Lakeview. And the guy I went to work for had a little single wide trailer out there. And so he put me up in it, and what I was doing was I was doing carpentry work for the lumber mill that was out there in Silver Lake. And they weren't cutting much lumber, but they needed things done, and they needed shacks built and stuff like that, and maintenance and stuff like that. So I was working there, but I had heard that there was a job opening at Les Schwab. Excuse me. And I thought to myself, what are the two things, or what's going to be around forever? I mean, basically forever. Food and cars. Food and cars. And so I said, so in the little town of Lakeview, food was Safeway, and Dad had already worked at Safeway, and I didn't know what I was going to do at Safeway. But Les Schwab, I knew that there was some opportunities to supposedly become a manager and get your own store. That Les promised to do that.
Yeah, because it was a different company back then.
Yeah, and so I was like, that could be cool. So I started putting in for it. They had an opening. I didn't get that one, so I kept putting my name in. Then they had another opening. I kept putting my name in. And I mean, I was calling them literally every day. And they finally hired another guy. And I was like, gosh, dang it. Come on, guys. And that guy was friends with the manager. The manager hired him. And the morning that he was supposed to go to work, he called and said, hey, I changed my mind. I'm sorry. I appreciate it, but I'm going to stay where I'm at. And the manager was so mad that he told his assistant manager, who was Dan Dollarhide at that time, he said, to hell with this. He said, go just hire somebody. And he left. He was so mad. He just took off. And I had been calling almost every day, talking to Dan, saying, hey, have you guys got a job opening? And he'd say, you know what? I didn't have one yesterday. I didn't have one the day before, the week before.
Stop calling me.
Stop calling. When something comes up, I'll let you know. And I called that morning after the manager had left. And I said, hey, got anything open? And he was going, yeah, for God's sakes, come in. And I said, are you serious?
Retarded or something?
And he says, yes, come in. I got a job for you. So I loaded up my tools, and I gave the guy And at that time, I don't think I gave him 2 weeks notice, but I don't think he cared. And I jumped in there and I went to work for Les Schwab in May 1st, 1981.
May 1st, 1981.
Yep.
And so you knew at that point too that you were looking at it for the long haul. You had ambition at that point to try to go as high up as you could.
Well, it was an opportunity, and that's what everybody said. Les Schwab said, "Hey, if you go to work for me, if you're honest and you take care of my customers, you take care of employees, don't cheat me, don't cheat customers, okay? Be loyal. I will build you a store, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
I will build you a store, and you will operate it, and we'll be partners." And I was like, who does that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, nobody does that. And at first I couldn't believe it. And so I went to work and I started seeing the manager and the opportunities that he had and the money that he was making. And I was like, that's what I've always wanted to do, was be my own boss. I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to answer to anybody. And so I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I do. So we were in Lakeview. That's where I met your mom, and we got married. And we were in Lakeview for just sales and service there. And then your mom, we had you, and we had Callahan, and then Dan Dollarhide got promoted to assistant manager, or I'm sorry, he got promoted earlier than that, and he went to be an assistant manager. And then a couple years later, he got promoted as manager in Omak, Washington. And his assistant manager only lasted about 5 months, and he quit and went back to the store that he was from. And so Dan needed an assistant manager. And I put my name in, and he was like, "Well, yeah, you guys need to come up and take a look." And I said, I know you. I want to work for you." And he was like, "No, you need to come up and look at the area." And I was like, "Okay, if that's what you need." So your mom at that time, it was such a long distance. It was 610 miles to Omak from Lakeview. So it was a 12-hour drive
Mm-hmm.
straight through. And your mom, both of us had decided that, I mean, I was going to take the job no matter what. It didn't matter. I didn't need to go up there, but I went ahead. I drove up. I worked that night, went in the next day, worked all day that day, and then left that night and drove home, and then waited a couple of days. And he said, "Yeah, okay, get up here and be my assistant manager." So your mom and I packed up everything, you guys, and drove to Omak.
And it was essentially a Washington version of Lakeview, right? It's basically the same size.
Yeah, basically the same size, Omak, and then just almost, I mean, like 2 miles, 3 miles away was Okanagan. And Omak, I think, was like 4,000 population, and then Okanagan was like 200. So that area right there was kind of about 6,000, 7,000. And there was some competition. It was a brand new store, and so there was a lot of hours that we had to work. There was only Dan, a one other sales and service, an alignment guy, and then a sales and admin lady. And so, I mean, we did most of the service calls. Anything that was late at night, we couldn't afford to pay anybody, so we did it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of hours. Then from there, we were there for a year and a half, and then I got promoted as the first assistant to Hermiston. And so at that time, I believe your mom was pregnant with Rudy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved to Hermiston, and Rudy was born in Hermiston, and we were in Hermiston for exactly 2 years, almost to the day. And then I got promoted to manager in the Dalles, and then we were in the Dalles for 28.
Yeah, glad we didn't stay in Hermiston.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I hate to cut it off right here, but we could go for another 2 hours. I kind of want to save the rest of it for another episode.
With Cliff.
Well, no, we could do another one, just you and I. But yeah, one with Cliff too, where you guys just go through all your childhood stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yep.